Welcome, everybody. It is great to have you today. My name is Gary Fowler, and I am the CEO, president, and co-founder of GSD Get Shit Done Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in Silicon Valley. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've done 17 companies, been involved in a couple unicorns. We look through the world for incredible technologies and incredible individuals. And with that, today, it is a great pleasure of mine to present Mike Moradi. Mike is a serial entrepreneur in the biotech and nanotech space. He is a founder of a company called Sensulin, which is developing a glucose response one-a-day insulin for type 2 and type 1 diabetes. He's an incredible guy, incredible background, and has done has had a couple of companies acquired, and just is has incredible insights into our topic today, which is defeating non-communicable diseases, the future of healthcare. And with that, I'll bring him on. Hi, Mike.
Yes, greetings. Good to see you, Gary.
We can't.
Oh, sorry. Mike. Yeah, I apologize. I guess, can you hear me now?
We can't hear you.
Testing again. I see. Oh no. Plan B. If I remove my headset, does it work now?
You might want to take the headphones off, Mike.
Yeah, I just removed my headset. I have not changed anything. Let's try one more. It's gonna be here. Back at plan. Okay, plan B. Can you hear me now? Any difference?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, but I can't hear you. The microphone's not working.
Oh no. Plan C. How about, are you able to hear me at the moment? Live issue.
No, it's on. It's off now, Mike.
Okay, apologies. Yeah, I can hear myself, but you can't.
Yeah, I got you now.
Okay.
Yeah,
nothing had changed.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Wow, that's incredible. So anyhow, I'm not sure what the problem was, but it's great to have you here today, and great to have you on the show. So let's talk about defeating non-communicable disease. What is the future of healthcare all about, and what's happening today?
Yeah. So as many of you are aware, it's a huge part of the economy, something like 15-16% of global GDP that's in healthcare, and it's a huge pain point for patients anytime they have to go to the hospital or to the pharmacy. And I think at least in the last 20 years, I graduated basically in 2000. Everything I learned in my biochemistry curriculum is more or less obsolete. At the time, people were celebrating the first human chromosome being sequenced. There was a cover of Science magazine that had the Sistine Chapel, essentially, where people were sort of unlocking the mysteries of life. And today, just the cost of sequencing a human genome is down to just under $100. The people in your world of artificial intelligence are collaborating with the scientists and biologists and clinicians in my world. And that's unlocking a huge array of possibilities for treating these diseases that people think are currently uncurable. So I'm particularly excited by the opportunities that this pandemic has brought, in shining a bright light on the great work being done in the life sciences, and just truly thrilled to be a part of that industry.
So how is this what do you think what does it look like over the next couple of years? I know you're working with Sensulin and, the glucose response system, but there's got to be the lifespan dramatically increases over the next 20 years or so, right? Because we're hearing about this all the time. All kinds of technologies that intervene.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have a lot of the tools necessary to extend lifespan, and more importantly, to extend health span. Because what is quality of life if you have the ability to sort of feel and feel like a young person, but your eyesight's failing. So I think particularly in the next 10 to 20 years, with advances in regenerative medicine, I'd see a lot of people in their 80s doing things that might be more common in your 40s. And a lot of that's being driven by these advancements in regenerative medicine. This is sort of a fundamental disconnect from the way that medicine is practiced today, using at least some of the advancements in stem cell therapies and engineered cells. You are able to at least attack some of the core disease cascades that lead to conditions like diabetes and rare forms of cancer, Alzheimer's. So, I think that's going to be very, very disruptive to the economy. And I guess it also raises a lot of questions like, what happens if people can live to be 150, 170 years old? How does that change societies? And these are the things that I, of course, a little bit worried about, but at least we'll do our best to work on the health span side of that equation.
Yeah, no, let's work on it. What about this thing with stem cells, by the way? So, you hear a lot about stem cells, and it sounds almost like a miracle cure for a lot of things. So, diabetes, I've actually heard about with heart people that have had heart attacks. Actually, I heard Mel Gibson on Joe Rogan talking about taking his dad down to Panama to some life institute down there, some stem cell institute. I mean, is it possible really to go in and if somebody's had a heart attack and actually use stem cells to repair damage?
Well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that you can regrow arteries and veins, things to sort of help with the plumbing around the heart, and at the same time, there's sort of a bifurcation of the industry where you have a lot of loosely regulated clinics all over the world that charge a lot of money and sort of have dubious benefits that they're touting. And on the other end of the spectrum, which is the place where we tend to play, in the highly regulated world of the Food and Drug Administration, which has very, very rigorous rules around clinical studies and of course, designed to ensure patient safety. So, I think the latter of those two, you're going to see more and more FDA approved stem cell therapies in the next 10 to 20 years. And of course, the clinics have always been around and will likely continue to be around. Just you won't find as many here in the United States for regulatory reasons. But I think to kind of paint a broader picture of what's possible, there are actually a couple of FDA approved treatments today for rare disorders. One that comes to mind, the leading cause of death among infants that is genetic. There is a treatment called Zolgensma, which essentially these children would live to be 12 months, 18 months on average before dying. And essentially that particular drug has a 93% cure rate. So, 10 years ago, it was a death sentence.
That's incredible. That is unbelievable. That is phenomenal. 93% cure rate?
Yeah, and these children, age, I guess, age 7 now, since being a part of that clinical trial, are able to grow up and have a normal childhood. So, super exciting. And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to these sort of engineered cells and stem cell therapy-based treatments.
So that interesting future. So tell me a little bit about, Sensolin and what you're doing and what kind of impact you're going to have.
I appreciate that. So, I'm sure all of your viewers have seen in the news, the insulin issues that are out there today. Since the Affordable Care Act was passed, the average price of a vial of insulin has actually gone up by a factor of 3. So in the past decade, it's increasingly hard for patients to be able to afford the modern insulins. And of course, without insulin, a type 1 patient will die. I mean, 100 years ago, when insulin was discovered by Dr. Banting and a couple of his colleagues, essentially it was the same as the disease I just described, where patients live on average 11 months following a diagnosis. And the only way to treat them before insulin was to give them just enough food so that they would not die. And of course, that's a very, very famous moment in medicine when Dr. Banting and his colleagues walked around this pediatric ward, injecting these, very, very skinny children with insulin. And one by one, they start kind of waking up and perking up. And of course, some of them lived to be, well into their 80s, which was actually beyond the life expectancy at the time. So what Senslin is doing is going to be, we believe, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, fundamental advancement in insulin since the discovery 100 years ago, which is to make insulin glucose responsive. So to put that in perspective, a type 1 patient wakes up in the morning and starts with a basal or slow release insulin injection. Every time they have a meal or snack, they have to give themselves a rapid acting insulin, which is an average of 6 injections per day. The version that we're making essentially would provide in one dose what currently requires those 6 injections. So a huge improvement in quality of life for patients. But on the safety side, which is the side that the FDA cares most about, we only release elevated amounts of insulin when blood sugar is high, which should help patients stay out of the emergency room. Believe it or not, I guess half the cost of treating type 1 diabetes is the one time per year on average that a patient has to go to like an emergency setting. And so if we can make that once every 2 years, once every 4 years, or hopefully never, that would be a huge improvement in quality of life. So very excited to at least have a role in hopefully getting affordable insulin, but also modern insulin into the hands of patients.
No, that's phenomenal. And at the same time, you've got a group, Cordado Ventures. What's Cordado doing? And it's, Cordado's in Oklahoma City, right? And you're in La Jolla today?
Well, yeah, I was one of those guys that traveled around quite a bit pre-pandemic, but I was involved with am involved with a small fund, Cortado, which is named after the short espresso drink with some cream. And essentially, caffeine has always been startup fuel for entrepreneurs over the centuries. In fact, I have a matcha in front of me at the moment. But yeah, Cortado is a $20 million seed fund that is looking to help build companies in the heartland, so to speak. Ever since the pandemic started, all of these distributed teams that have kind of sprung up because people didn't want to live in San Francisco or the middle of New York City when they could essentially stop, paying rent and go find some mansion for half of what they were paying in the big city. And we find that in these communities, there's really no geographic lock on innovation. So you see a lot of the same, fintech and life sciences companies, or at least projects, in places like Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and having, like yourself, been around the world a few times and having a global network in the industry, we can help make that connection for an entrepreneur who might have a great technology but not necessarily access to Silicon Valley or the sort of the Zurich family office crowd. So we think these sort of smaller funds in second and third tier cities are going to find some of the opportunities of the future. And this pandemic really has accelerated that process. You'd be amazed at the ideas that we're seeing just across the tech spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And so, okay, so you got Senslin, you've got Cortado, R3 Bio. So is that still what's going on with R3 Bio?
So that's actually the one that I believe will be perhaps the most impactful entity going forward that I'm involved with at the moment. And essentially, we'll be building new regenerative medicine companies out of let's just say out of the Boston ecosystem primarily, but also other prominent academic institutions. And in this case, we're setting out to raise a $100 million fund, which it's really not necessarily a fund. It's more of an incubator model where we'll be creating companies from scratch. And ended up, actually, we are currently oversubscribed, just partially because of the amazing team that we've put together. some former venture capitalists who are in the top 1% of all GPs in the entire preprint database, and of course a great team around some of the leadership at the Harvard Stem Cell Institute, and so looking to do more or less what we started talking about at the beginning of the show, trying to tackle those huge non-communicable diseases from a cure perspective as opposed to a treatment perspective.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. What about, during this COVID, I know that a number of the drug companies use AI for modeling instead of bench time. How important do you think artificial intelligence is going to be in terms of when you look at the discovery processes out there? Where's AI fit in?
So I would say, across the board in the R&D community, AI is going to completely change the way that research is done. One of our colleagues in R3 is David Berry with Velo Health, which has raised something like $400 million to build the first sort of digital AI-enabled biotech company, and this has all happened in the last sort of 24 months. And the thesis is, essentially they're able to take a research project from start to clinical proof of concept, meaning phase 2 study within 24 months, which is basically unheard of. I would say the COVID vaccines are another great example of that. Starting with a genetic sequence, Moderna was able to essentially produce a commercial vaccine in less than a year. And that was all kind of enabled by these, this sort of supercomputing power, the machine learning, the algorithms that sort of power our phones and our other sort of bigger systems in the world. So I think that this is, again, just the beginning of a very long process. I think that I would not be surprised if the world's first trillionaire is sort of an AI life sciences person.
I mean, the one thing about it is everybody wants to live longer, right? I mean, for the most part. And the situation with the advancements that are coming out today, I know I was on a panel probably 8 months ago. A group, PharmaVision, was doing a research project on artificial intelligence. It was interesting because I could feel, the folks that are doing the bench time against the AI modeling. But I mean, look what happened with this pandemic and some of these vaccines that came out, and I know that have come out. I know that some of them were built using artificial intelligence and AI modeling. I mean, Pfizer, from what I understand, is one of those companies with IBM. So it's an incredible time. It's exciting. So how do you go from Oklahoma to La Jolla, California?
Yeah, well, in our case,
I've been in Oklahoma. I think I told you I went from Arkansas across the state, and it was linear, completely linear. Going, and people were really nice, but it was completely linear. I couldn't believe it. It was and beautiful from my standpoint too, but linear.
Yeah, well, I guess I recall you also spent some time in Wichita, which very close to the place where I grew up. And but I guess starting prior to that, I was originally born in Iran to an Iranian father and a Hispanic American mother, and we fled before all the unpleasantness. So I was born in January of '78. We left that summer before things got really bad, and my father is actually a chemist who worked for one large energy company for his whole career, and here I am at age 43 on my 13th or 14th company. So a very, very different career path for you and for me and those of us in this generation. But I ended up getting a biochemistry degree and ended up dropping out of dental school in order to do my first startup, which failed miserably, I might add. But thankfully, the second one worked, which made nanoparticle titanium dioxide for UV inhibition. So that's a fancy
nanoparticle titanium dioxide.
Yeah, it's a fancy way of saying the active ingredient in sunscreens, automotive coatings.
Wow, there you go.
Anything that can be damaged by the sun.
I got it. And so what? So you drop out of medical school or dental school, and you start this company, and you failed. What drove you to start the next company? How did you feel after that, and how did you stay positive to start the next company?
Well, I think growing up in that part of the country, where if you recall in the early 80s and the mid 80s, there was a lot of pressure on oil prices. And, so my dad would come home from work and say things like, don't go work for a big company. You need to be your own boss. And none of that stuff really registered at the time. But when I was in the university environment, had some great mentors who had kind of dabbled in startups and these transformative tech projects. Like one gentleman, helped increase the yield of these semiconductor wafers from like 2% to 99%, and kind of described the R&D process that he went through. And I just kind of fell in love with this whole concept of new technology commercialization. And so that was kind of the seed, I guess, that led me to not want to go work for a big company. But I guess at the end of the day, it was just a desire to have a big impact on the world. And the more that you do this stuff, the more sort of that you build your own network, the better you get at it. And so I'm absolutely thrilled that I have the opportunity to work on some of these great projects.
Well, but when you went from your one that failed to your next one, how did you keep your spirits up? I have startups ask me that a lot, in terms of how do you stay positive when you go down through and fail. So what did you do?
Yeah, I guess when you're in your 20s, you're in a unique position to absorb risk. You don't have, in most cases, a huge family and a lot of kids to look after, and the consequences of failure are not what they would be in your 50s if you kind of put your nest egg into something. So I think it was part of just that naivety that I didn't really think about the failure. In fact, I know a lot of investors who prefer to invest in people who've been through a couple of companies and not succeeded. I also think of people like Max Levchin, who went through 4 startups before PayPal. And I guess for you, Gary, which one is out of the 17? Where did it kind of start working for you?
I mean, I've had some ones. I think I told you, Mike. I had one of them that I didn't do my customer development. I learned a valuable lesson. The customers drive the process. I mean, there aren't many Steve Jobs that can come out with technologies that people are going to want without really testing it. And from my standpoint, what happened is I had a project. I decided that I knew more than the customers, and I made a dramatic mistake. It was a construction tech project. I had designed modular homes, and big ones too, like 6,000 square feet, 7,000. And I just decided that I knew something simple, the color of the carpet. I decided that navy blue was a really good color because it looked rich. I didn't think about women don't like it, and many of them don't like it, and it's not neutral because I had done it so many times. It was actually one of my first startups. I'd done construction tech too, and it took me 3 years to get to make a lot of changes to get to sell it. And I made a little bit of money on it, but I learned a valuable lesson. Customer development is critically important. I don't care what kind of innovation you have. If people don't want to buy it, it doesn't matter. So what happened is carpet had to be taken out, new carpet had to be put in, and some changes need to be made. And it seems like a simple thing, but here's this advanced technology, very interesting technology, be able to build a house in 4 months, right? That's a huge house, a lead house, over 6,000 square feet. And then, no, nobody wanted it because I didn't listen. And so I learned a lesson. And so from that time on, I listened. So customers are always number one. And before, like with Eva, my company with David Yang, what we did is we went out and did our customer development. We walked down the street in university in Palo Alto, and we would talk to people. We had PowerPoint presentation on our notebook, and I set up my iPhone on a stand, and we would record the conversation, and I would send it back to my engineers and say, listen, this is what the customer says. And I did 50, actually almost 100. My partner did the same amount, and my partner's a billionaire, David Yang. But he did the same. We walked down the street. And once we understood what they wanted, but then the other thing is to make it and get them, will they buy it and take it out of your hands, as Bob Dorff and Steve Blank said. And so I had to pivot 3 times. I mean, it was painful, painful because, the first pivot, we thought we nailed it, but people just don't want to pay. Google likes search for your personal cloud. They're used to Google giving it for free. They don't understand Google's making money, right, in a different kind of way. And so they didn't want to do it. They wanted it for free. I had 167,000 customers, but they didn't want to pay. So we pivoted, and I think you understand it. Then the pivoted to the second one, and the second version of it was that we were doing a smart assistant. The problem is Google just purchased a company in the smart assistant side close to our space, and it just wasn't there. And so again, we took the patents and pivoted again to remote workforce management, artificial intelligence before the pandemic, 2 years before, and hit it. We hit it. The inbound interest is up 38 times because of the pandemic.
Wow. I think at least for the younger entrepreneurs watching, that's a very powerful lesson. A billionaire essentially walking the streets of Palo Alto, looking for user feedback. The customer always has a seat at the table, right? The voice of the customer is super important. And the same lesson was one that I also had to learn the hard way. Pre-pandemic, the first thing I would do when I would raise the first, 25, 50K would be to go out and visit with all the potential partners and acquirers for our life sciences project, because they'll tell you exactly how ugly your baby is. They'll say, you need to do these things. Here's the specs you need to hit. And only if you get these things done will we consider partnering with you. And not only will you learn a lot, but you sort of, they'll help set the bar for here's what you need to be doing for the next 12, 24, 36 months. And of course, the good news is if you are a young entrepreneur, you can do all of that virtually now. You don't have to waste the time, traveling around to all these different places. And so, if there's one silver lining, I guess that's one of many. But yeah, it allows you to essentially have access to people that you wouldn't otherwise be able to access.
No, I agree. But here's the other thing. I don't know if this is like this for you, but because we've been doing this for a year, for the pandemic, I've set up so many online meetings and so many webinars and podcasts and that kind of thing. I can't leave. I'm like in the gilded cage. It's like incredible because, that's the way we communicate now. This morning I was been on the call with Rwanda, with Nigeria, with Singapore, with the UK, with Russia. I mean, all over. And I've never had to leave anywhere. I'm not spending the money. I'm not, wasting money in terms of expenses. Really condensed, and it's really interesting. It's a dilemma now because on one side you're optimized and you're highly, highly efficient. On the other side, you want to get out and you want to meet with people. I don't know about you, but I miss it. And it's this kind of thing is like, okay, so if I fly out on the weekend back to California, and then I start meeting on Monday, what I can do is because of time differences, I'll still have the rest of the afternoon, time difference from the East Coast to do some things. So it's interesting how this shifted our lives, like completely digitally transformed our lives and our company's lives.
Well, you might think about, I work with a lot of physicians who had that problem pre-pandemic. So if they want to take vacations, they schedule them a year in advance. There's this week in the spring, this week in the summer, this week in the fall, and just jealously guard that time for unwinding, and then of course try to build in some serendipity here and there throughout the year. But I'm also reminded that I think I read in a book about Alan Greenspan, he would schedule 2-hour blocks. Like he would only do 4 meetings per day in person. Otherwise, he had no time to follow up and do research and all the other super important things that one needs to do at that level in an organization. So, I think all of us have been adjusting and will continue to adjust as the world changes. And of course, I traveled a lot. As you know, I was probably on the road 50 to 75% of the time pre-pandemic. And it was too much. It was unsustainable. And I guess now, I do a lot of that virtually. I will have calls with Europe in the morning, Asia at night. And so, I guess we probably all need to do a bit better job setting boundaries.
Well, I think part of it was before we were really driven to have those on-site meetings, people didn't want to do things remote because they wanted to get out too. Now the situation, people are used to it. And by the way, you're right. You can get a hold of a lot higher level folks today than you could before, because they have more time. Their time. I don't know about you, but my time in terms of number of meetings compared to physical meetings, it's got to be double, maybe triple what I was able to do before. Because I can do them in general. I can do them back to back, at least double.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Likewise. It's been super productive in many ways, but I think maybe this summer, presuming the cases are under control, I would bet it's going to be really hard to get a hold of big tech.
Exactly. I think you're 100% right. But the other thing is, Mike, you can go around. One of the things like this week, I'm going to go down to Key West and work out of there for 2 weeks. But it doesn't matter. I got my computer. It doesn't matter really where I am. It only matters, that I'm doing it. So that's a benefit. Going back through, what do you see over the next? So 1 to 5 years in terms of technologies that are going to really shift everything from a biotech standpoint. What's coming up? If you take the top 3 that are interesting from your standpoint, what would you say those are today, and what should those investors be looking out for?
So in the biotech world, at least the regulated side, things tend to happen a little bit slower, just given that you might spend from start to finish 5 to 10 years developing a drug to commercial availability, and maybe it could be a little bit shorter than that now for the reasons we mentioned earlier. But I would say near the top of the list, there's a lot of really clever people pursuing these engineered cells, engineered genes to solve very complex problems. So there are a number of diseases where a single gene has at least a negative effect, resulting in some difficult to cure disease. So in the last couple of years, you've seen companies essentially just flipping the switch, changing that gene, and more or less eliminating the disease entirely. Mm-hmm. And that was really just the first wave. I think going forward, there's a lot more complicated processes. Like for instance, we're actually looking at a company right now that's able to regrow spinal nerves. So somebody that would have a car crash or some other accident that would sever the spinal cord, they're able to take at least the healthy surrounding tissue and regrow those nerves in a way that essentially would restore at least most of the essential functions. And so I think it's going to be a virtual renaissance in the life sciences over the next 10 to 20 years as we begin to crack these diseases that the diseases that kill people today, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes. These are all largely non-communicable in nature. 100 years ago, the diseases that actually killed people were all infectious. And that's really a great example because pretty much with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, all of those have been cured. So the more smart people that set their mind towards these big NCDs, the more likely that at least we'll be living longer, healthier lives. And if you're an investor in the space, what a great way to have a lasting impact on humanity.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Well, listen, we're coming up to the top of the hour. I really appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedule. It's great to see you again, Mike. And how do people get a hold of you? We've got investors and entrepreneurs out there, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
LinkedIn, Twitter, just send me a private message on any of the big platforms. And I'm super excited to be able to work on these ideas. And here's hoping that the next time you and I meet will actually be in person.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to see you. I really appreciate your time and look forward to it. Let's work on some projects together. To my audience, thank you again for coming today. We appreciate it. GSD presents Silicon Valley AI and Tech. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay optimistic, and go get them. Thank you very much, and see you again next Tuesday. Take care.
Cheers.